good afternoon, and a warm welcome, everyone, to this online policy briefing organized by the European Policy Center with Bojan Marichikj, Minister of Justice of the Republic of North Macedonia. Last spring, North Macedonia received, together with Albania, the Council's green light for the start of its long-delayed accession talks with the EU. Then, last October, the country could pride itself with the most positive assessment among all the Balkan countries evaluated in the European Commission's 2020 report. At last, Skopje seemed to be sailing smoothly towards the EU. And then November came, and saw Bulgaria refusing to approve the EU membership negotiation framework for North Macedonia over issues of history and language. The boat started to rock again, and many felt a strong sense of déjà vu. After all, a clash with Greece over the country's name had previously frustrated North Macedonia's efforts to join the EU for a decade until the two finally resolved the issue in 2019. Despite being undoubtedly disappointed with its neighbor's decision to raise further obstacles to its EU membership bid, North Macedonia tried to keep its focus on the reform agenda and forge ahead in its efforts to strengthen democracy and the rule of law as a prerequisite for joining the European Union. In fact, earlier this month, the government in Skopje adopted a new reform program called Europe at Home, which reconfirms the country's determination to implement domestically European standards and values. Will this initiative suffice to break the impasse and open the way for the country's start of accession negotiations with the EU? What is North Macedonia doing to ensure a good track record of reforms in the field of democracy, the rule of law, and the fight against corruption? How is Skopje trying to persuade the member states of its commitment to EU integration? And what are the risks of keeping North Macedonia's path to EU membership, and incidentally also that of Albania, blocked? Minister Marichikj is here with us today to help us answer these and other related questions. Thank you very much, Minister, for taking the time to brief us about your country's ongoing EU integration efforts. I propose that we first listen to your message for 15-20 minutes, and then I will open the floor and invite our participants in the audience to comment or ask you questions live or in written. If that's okay with you, then welcome, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Corina. It's my pleasure to be here today in Brussels and to have an address and open the discussion for North Macedonia's path towards the EU, the epic story of the European accession, particular case in the Western Balkans. And I'm really glad that EPC organized this event to inform the participants, but also to get feedback from the Brussels stakeholders. I think that you made a very good opening of the discussion, but I will say a few things once again. The process of starting of the accession negotiations of North Macedonia with the EU has turned into an epic struggle between history and reality. I think that none of the candidate countries from the Western Balkans have waited so long in the waiting room to start the negotiations. We have fully met all the conditions to start the negotiations back in 2019. We have accepted the necessity of opening or devising new methodology for negotiations at the end of 2019 and beginning of 2020. We were very happy to see the decision, the unanimous decision of all the member states 1 year ago in March 2020 to open the negotiations. And we have been very happy with presentation of the negotiation framework by the European Commission last year. Unfortunately, because of another bilateral issue or matter of history, interpretation of history and identity, we are now stuck again, and we hope to reopen the dialogue with Bulgaria and finish before the middle of this year. I will briefly speak about this issue, and then I would like to present what we are doing in spite of the impasse that we are facing for quite a time. We think that, of course, every member state has its own right to open bilateral issues. But what is important for the countries of the Western Balkans, and particularly for North Macedonia and its citizens, is to avoid the perception that the European integration is actually only about bilateral disputes with the neighbors. Because the dominant perception of the citizens in North Macedonia, and I think it's not only in our country, is that European integration is about satisfying the neighbors or resolving bilateral disputes, and it has nothing to do with any European standards, with rule of law, with common market and functional democracy, etc. I think that is, of course, not true, but it's the perception that we're getting with these dominant bilateral disputes is certainly harmful for the European agenda as such in our country. The second thing, speaking about the Bulgarian dispute or the dispute we have with Bulgaria, is that we need to act quickly. So right after the elections in Bulgaria, we need to reopen the dialogue and try to reach a solution sooner better than later, because the lesson from the blockade that we had from Greece, or the dispute that we had with Greece, is that the longer the dispute takes, the worse the things can get in the country. And this is why I think that still the transformative power and the motivation for reforms comes actually from the process of integration and particularly from the negotiations. This is why I think we need to act quickly after the elections in Bulgaria. The third element of this dispute that is important for finding a solution without getting into details on the matter of the dispute is that we need to have a sustainable solution, a solution that not just any solution, but solution that will equally respect the positions of both sides, particularly when we discuss identity issues. The Balkan countries and any country would be sensitive. So I think what we need is a solution that will last and that can be actually presented to the citizens of North Macedonia as a good solution and viable solution that will bring better neighborly relations rather than a solution that will fuel nationalism in the country. This is why I hope that if there is a good political will, good intentions, and sufficient effort, we can reach an agreement and have very soon, even in June this year, a positive decision for adopting the negotiation framework. But as you mentioned, and this is crucial to us, that we have no time to waste. We have been waiting for too long to start the negotiations. And this is why we have adopted the agenda Europe at Home. We have also adopted a government plan for fighting corruption. And we have also adopted, actually the Judicial Council has adopted a plan for integrity check of the judges and also prosecutors in the country related to the sector judiciary. One of the biggest priorities on the agenda Europe at Home, all of these agendas are complementary, and this is why I will comment my portfolio and portfolio of justice, judiciary, and rule of law. One of the biggest priorities on this agenda is certainly rule of law and restoring the citizens' trust in the system, in the rule of law, which has shaken during the past 10 years of the previous government. We know that North Macedonia has been a country with issue of the judicial system, state capture, and issue of reform in the institutions. And this is why we think that rule of law must be priority together with the enabling mechanisms of independent judiciary and fight against corruption. We have been commended by the European Commission in the country reports many years in a row, particularly the last 4. And as you mentioned, last year in October, we have got the most positive report, uh, acknowledging that there are independent judiciary mechanisms developed compared to what was before. That also it was stated there that we have good results in lawmaking, but that we need a better track record. I think that in the meantime, in the past 6 months, all the institutions have worked a lot on getting a better and tangible results in the track record in its implementation, particularly in the work of the judiciary and fight against corruption. I'm pleased to mention that last month, after several years of trial, the former head of Secret Service in North Macedonia got a sentence of 12 years in prison for the guilty and found guilty for illicit interceptions and wiretapping in the country that took place years ago. And actually, this was the main case opened by the former special public prosecutor. This was the case that actually was open to resolve the mass breach of human rights and illegal wiretapping. So this case called Target Fortress was the case actually that the most important case so far that we had a first court instance decision after many years of trial. Also, there are in parallel several other cases for money laundering and illegal financing of political parties. So I think that all the institutions have taken notice of what the European Union said, that they need to work more on implementation and track record, including the public prosecutor's office. Speaking about the judiciary and about the integrity check, the idea of the integrity check process in the judiciary came out after we've been rejected back in 2017 to implement vetting process in the judiciary, that like the one in Albania. The European Union did not endorse that, and instead we have decided to strengthen the integrity check system by making the criteria quite specific and by producing, of course, the Judicial Council to produce an internal plan for integrity check at the level of professional performance and on the level of declaration of assets. And that plan that is implemented for over a year has given tangible results. We have 12 judges dismissed based on this plan and based on this criteria. And for each of them, there is a specific explanation on what ground they're dismissed, which is different than in the past when one of the main remarks of the European Commission was that the judges have been dismissed without particular stated ground. We also work a lot on strengthening the financial resources by strengthening on one side the responsibility of the judges and prosecutors. We need to provide on the other side strengthen financial resources and independence of the public prosecutor's office and judiciary. Particularly, the new law on public prosecutor's office gives a lot of opportunities to the office of the public prosecutor dealing with high corruption and organized crime. And that office has got a significant budgetary increase. The salaries also of the prosecutors in that office have been increased by 35%. They have got new venues and strengthened capacities to work. But generally, the government is making an additional effort to strengthen the human resources and financial resources of all the courts and the prosecutors' offices in the country in order to provide them with all the necessary conditions to deliver. Another process that I would like to mention is the process of digitalization in the judiciary. With help of the European Union and other partner countries interested in this area, like United States, Norway, etc. There is a process of digitalization of the courts, which will also entail equipment for over 120 courtrooms for digital sessions and also legislative amendments for enabling digital sessions. This will increase the transparency, the responsibility, but also the accountability of the courts. We strongly believe that by this, we will make the work of the courts much more efficient and much more transparent to the citizens. And this is also a contribution to restoring the trust in the judiciary by the citizens, particularly in context of COVID crisis. Uh, Additionally, the government presented an ambitious plan to fight corruption. It is a problem faced by all the countries, but we are now building a governmental mechanism together with the State Anti-Corruption Committee and together with the organized crime and corruption prosecution to keep the good track record and to increase the track record of fighting corruption with specific cases and not only with action plans and with good intentions. Uh, and by that, I can only say that the State Commission for Prevention of Corruption and the State Commission for Anti-Discrimination, which were both adopted unanimously in the Parliament, supported by all the political parties, is a good start for these plans. Just at the end of my presentation, I would like to mention another process that is important for us, and that is the process of implementation of the census of the population, which comes out after 20 years. We had one unsuccessful attempt back in 2011, sorry. So after 10 years or after 20 years in total, we are organizing now census of the population, which is going on for the diaspora at the moment, and which will take place in April for the population in North Macedonia. We know that the opposition has opened some questions and dilemmas whether the census should be organized now and in what way, but we have got the Eurostat support, and it was publicly said that the census will be conducted according to the European standards. And we think that this is extremely important, particularly for the development of the country, particularly because we are the only European country that didn't have census for 20 years, for successful policy development, but also for closing issues among the different nationalist groups in the country who relate the result of the census with rights of the ethnic communities. This is why we need to finish this process, and we think that it will be successfully finished on the course of April, maybe with a small extension in May because of the COVID crisis. So this is what's important now. We're also working on the electoral code amendments for the local elections, but I think this is enough for introduction, and I'm ready and willing to answer the questions.
Thank you very much, Minister. I would like to now invite our participants to ask the Minister questions or to make comments. And I see that we already have one question which was sent in written to us from Sabine Zeger. She's asking, why has Skopje not been able to resolve the problems with Bulgaria so far? Why? And of course, she's reiterating what you also said, that the EU should avoid to bring bilateral issues into the enlargement process. And for that, I want to add to our guest's question, a question myself, and to ask you, how can we ensure that bilateral issues remain outside this process? What can be done in order to keep the two separately?
Yeah, I mean, Corina, it's $1 million question. You know, we are really interested in how to make this, and we also opened this back in times when we had the issue with Greece. And I think that definitely the European Union should devise a methodology or mechanism for dealing with the bilateral disputes, which have nothing to do with adopting the European standards and of and everything else related with the European integration. The first to come to why we haven't reached an agreement with Bulgaria. We've been trying for quite a time. Actually, we signed a treaty for friendship and partnership back in 2017, which actually gave a framework of how to deal with the differences regarding the historic events and historic persons. There are also a couple of committees formed, bilateral committees between North Macedonia and Bulgaria that should discuss these issues and find solutions over time. Of course, Bulgaria was not satisfied with the dynamics. We were also occasionally not satisfied with the dynamics. But the issues of history and the issues of identity can only be resolved with serious discussion and preparation of the societies for opening some taboos regarding the history and identity. Otherwise, it can only fuel the nationalism. And I think this is what happened. Unfortunately, Bulgaria tried to open some of these issues from a position of a member state. I think that some of the issues should not be discussed at all, like the issue of the language, because I think that it is quite clear, and the Macedonian language was normalized long ago. So, particularly after the concept of the Western Balkan countries was that each language will be nominated as the name of the country, or as they feel, like Montenegrin, Bosnian, Serbian, Croatian, etc., regardless of the similarities. But with the case of the Macedonian language, it has been standardized for quite some time. It has uh, particular similarities, but a lot of differences with the Bulgarian language, including the alphabet. And this is why I think that this is opening the issue of the language in the 21st century will not bring any benefit to improving the relations, nor or it has nothing to do with European values or European standards. To the contrary, this is why I think this we have come to a point of blockade. But I think that there is, if we take care about how to resolve this issue based on European values, how to resolve this issue based on the common interests of both countries, and if we uh, leave the identity to the self-determination area and keep the open historic issues on the table for the historians and politicians to discuss, and also to improve our relations in terms of economy, in terms of communication, culture, etc. I think it's possible to find a solution. The treaty that we signed back in 2017, the purpose of that treaty was to open dialogue that will last for a long time and that will give sustainable results. Of course, that agreement has certainly gave some results and some outcomes, but apparently not enough to close all the issues. But I think it is a good framework to deal with the differences, and I hope that the Bulgarian government after the elections will be ready to discuss rationally, just as we are ready to discuss rationally what is possible and what is not. Speaking about the EU, shortly about EU bilateral disputes. This was a destiny of many countries. This was destiny of Croatia, that had a dispute with Slovenia. This is also issue with Serbia and Kosovo, but this is of course larger security issue of the region, larger than a bilateral dispute. We had one with Greece. Slovenia had one back in times with Italy. There were also disputes between Romania and Hungary, or Slovakia and Hungary, etc. But what I think is important is that these bilateral disputes should be put on a separate track, apart from the negotiations that is organized in chapters or clusters right now, and that the bilateral disputes should be resolved till the end of the negotiations with the EU, and not to be used as a blockade for certain uh, stations on the way of the negotiations, because this has a very extremely detrimental effect to the internal reforms when they're stopped by the bilateral disputes, because the motivation for moving forward and for doing more are stuck, and the entire country is focused only on the bilateral dispute. This is why I think that there should be a separate track for the bilateral disputes that should be resolved. I know that the former president of the European Commission, Juncker, mentioned this many times, that there is no integration of the Western Balkans without resolving the bilateral disputes. That makes sense, of course, but that should be done till the end of the process of accession, and not at the very beginning and with years of postponement and delays.
Yes, absolutely. And what do you think of the idea of getting rid of unanimity for all the stages of the accession process, and actually for these intermediate decisions have instead, for example, qualified majority?
I was looking forward to you mentioning this. I think it's a wonderful idea, and we have been mentioning this even before with Greece. I think we need to make one thing is clear: we need to make the process of accession more efficient. I mean, accession talks that last for 20 years and give no result, it's not a purpose of any policy. It shouldn't be purpose of European Commission, shouldn't be purpose of the member states, and definitely is not a purpose of the Western Balkan countries or any candidate country. We have a case with Serbia and Montenegro, whose negotiations last for uh, 10 years now, or 9 years maybe. We are waiting to start for 15 years, and this is why I think this is one of the things that can be done, and this will actually open a separate track for bilateral disputes. Of course, for the final act of accession, we certainly need unanimity because the system is so now. But for the on the way stops, I think it's very good idea to introduce qualified majority, or unanimity -1, -2, or whatever the European policy creativity can think of. But I think that will speed up the processes, and it will be very beneficial for both.
And because you mentioned Montenegro and Serbia, both of which have been negotiating for a very long time now, we have a question from Francois Lafont, who is asking what, essentially, I'm paraphrasing the question that he posed because it's a long one. If I understood correctly, he is asking how and what can North Macedonia learn from the experience of these countries negotiating with the EU, particularly on the subject of the rule of law, so that North Macedonia becomes a positive example and may even become the front runner in the process. So any lessons, any learnings?
Well, I think that the best lessons we can hear from Serbia and Montenegro. I mean, they themselves can give us the best lesson. But as an outsider in those two countries, I cannot comment details there. But what I think it is very important is to keep this fundamentals chapter always in the focus. I think one of the best things with the new methodology is that what was already introduced with the new approach before is to keep these issues always on the table, because the Balkan countries, Western Balkan countries, and also not only our countries but some countries that are now member states of the European Union, have demonstrated that there is always a place for backsliding at a later stage. This is why I think it's crucial that if we put uh, the lesson that we have learned is that we should put always the rule of law and the judiciary and the democracy issues in front of the European agenda, because this is the only way to keep the good shape of the system, on board, and to have preconditions, good preconditions for economic development, for good management of the European funds, which is always an issue, and for effective policy making in all the other areas like transport, like agriculture, like uh, trade, and etc. So this is why I think if we keep the fundamentals in the focus all the time, particularly now, and now we are all the issues related to the fundamentals are on the top of the agenda of our government, uh, be it judiciary, fundamental rights, statistics, financial control. Also, we are working very closely with the European Commission uh, to implement the economic plan that was presented by the EU and by the Commissioner Vaheli some time ago, because we need to make the our system as compatible as possible with the system of the EU member states. This is why I think the best lesson learned is to always keep an eye and always keep high standards and higher standards in the area of rule of law, judiciary, fundamental rights, and fundamentals as cluster.
Right. I will. I do want to encourage our participants to continue to ask questions and to raise their hands. And I will give now the floor to Paul Butcher, who's the only brave one wanting to intervene directly. Paul, you have the floor.
Thanks, Corina. And thank you to the Minister for this, for coming here and speaking to us today. Welcome back to the EPC. It's good to see that we can continue to have good contacts with Skopje, even in these remote days. Minister, the Europe at Home reform programme, if I've understood correctly, seems to be a way to kind of start implementing EU-related reforms even without starting the accession negotiations. I'm sure that you originally expected to have already been able to get a start with negotiations by this stage, but since that's not the case, I assume the reform programme is partly to kind of keep the ball moving even while you're waiting for the negotiations to start. But I was wondering, to what extent do you feel that you really need to be part of the formal accession negotiation process in order to make the necessary reforms? Can you kind of implement the reforms anyway, almost acting as if North Macedonia was already part of the formal procedure? Or do you really need the EU's guidance beyond the annual Commission reports and so on? Or maybe to put the question in a different way, does starting the process formally have a significance for you beyond merely the symbolic or political one? Thanks very much.
This is my favorite question, Paul. Thank you. Look, we have been in this situation many times in the past. We know that whenever the start of the negotiations was postponed, the things were usually running in a wrong direction. This is why we have tried to make a solid and tangible plan called Europe at Home, which has a intention to keep the administration, the parliament, but also the society active in implementing the transformative agenda, the reforms. So Europe at Home is a message that we are primarily implementing the reforms for our own good and for the purpose of changing our country to better. But I have to tell you that what experience tells us, why do we need the formal process? Let me explain you practically. I have budgeted in the budget of the Ministry of Justice a representative of the ministry in Brussels. The Ministry of Finance also has budgeted a representative of the ministry in Brussels. All our policies and all our the entire shape of the institutional setup was designed to start the negotiations. We have provided funds for that, and we have activated the administration. We have activated the society, and it can only be in full capacity if there is an active process. We know that the purpose of the transformation is our own good, but we also know that you run much better when you have a target. You're doing much better when you have an active process. Uh, and this has always been the case in North Macedonia, and it has always been a case in the region. I think that the fact that North Macedonia got stuck for a decade and finally finished back in 2016 and 2017 with systemic issues regarding the captured state and the rule of law is actually because we have been for such a long time in an impasse with the European Union accession. Because after some time, the motivation of the administration declines, the motivation of the political class declines, and it's very difficult to keep it up if there is not an active process. So Europe at home is something that we need to do, is something that we must do, and something that is good for the country. But it doesn't mean that it replaces opening of the negotiations. To the contrary, it is only a bridge how to uh, pass this period until we open the negotiations. And the longer the negotiations are delayed, the worse it will be for the country. The best way to keep the good work of the institutions, to motivate many people, because of this, many good people from our administration have left the institutions. This is why we cannot, I mean, our mission in Brussels has around 10 people. The Montenegrin mission has 35 people. This is because they have active process. This is because they have increased the communication and the presence, not only in Brussels, but across the member states. And this is something that motivates and mobilizes the institutions and the country. So I think no matter how enthusiastic we are about reforms and about Europe at home, which is the case at the moment, and this is why we are doing it, because we have done a lot and we don't want to waste it. But we need to have open negotiations in order to deliver even better, because we're asking for a chance to negotiate. We're not asking for a membership tomorrow. Uh, we're asking for a chance to give better results and to transform our country and to finish the transition, the never-ending transition.
And may I ask, apart from doing your best at home in trying to stick to the reform agenda and to advance, even in the absence of a formal engagement in the accession process yet, what else are you doing to sustain communication with Brussels and with the member states? Can you tell us a little bit about, for example, your diplomatic efforts to persuade member states that opening accession negotiations, that is not the same as opening the door for a new member tomorrow?
Yeah, that is an effort that we are doing for quite a lot of time. We started with these arguments back in 2019 when France was actually skeptical about the start of the negotiations. And our argument was always that we're not asking for membership tomorrow, but for a many years process, the process that lasts for many years and that should give us a chance to transform. I think that our diplomacy, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Deputy Prime Minister for European Affairs, are in this period very active across the EU member states to explain that we, after so many steps in the past years, after so many positive reports, after the Prespa agreement, and after what the decision for start of the negotiations, we really need to work together to improve the credibility of the European Union, but also to to give the opportunity of all the Western Balkan countries to start the negotiations, but particularly we're speaking about North Macedonia. We also mentioned many times that the case of North Macedonia has tested in several occasions the credibility of the European perspective. Because we would never believe if a few years ago we were told that we're gonna resolve the issue with Greece and we're not going to start the negotiations immediately. Uh, this was one of our main motivations, and this was one of our main arguments when we were convincing the citizens to vote for at the referendum. So I think that particularly the big capitals like Paris, Berlin, etc., understand the gravity of this case. I also know that, as we have seen in the past council meetings, that Czech Republic and Slovakia understand very well the situation and the importance of stepping up for European values. This is why I think, together with the Commission and with most of the member states, we also work with Greece and the other member states to really keep in focus the importance of opening the negotiations now, this year, better than any next year, because uh, I think that it is all every delay of starting of the negotiations had consequences, always had consequences in North Macedonia. So this delay will also have consequences. And I know that it is important also for Albania to start the negotiations together with us. And we hope that this will happen.
When you mention consequences, do you refer to this motivation that you've mentioned a couple of times, that this could take its toll on the motivation to reform? Is that what you mean? And also, I wanted to ask, given that North Macedonia has really done a lot to resolve the conflict, well, not the conflict, but the dispute with Greece. And it has asked a lot of its citizens, in a sense. Do you think that there is room to ask for more in case further requests are made this time from the side of Bulgaria?
No, the problem is that we are not sure that even if we resolve the issue with Bulgaria, that there will be something new or something different. This is when I say credibility of the European perspective is at stake. This is what I mean. When I say consequences, those consequences are multiple. First of all, is the motivation of the administration, the trust of the citizens in European Union and in our future in European Union, because as I already mentioned, many people perceive the European accession as completely pointless if it comes only to how to deal with the neighbors and how to deal with bilateral disputes, particularly if those bilateral disputes refer to identity, to history, to things that are very difficult to discuss and resolve for a short period of time. And when we speak about how to convince the citizens for us, it's a problem to convince the citizens that the European Union policy will be credible and will honor the promises or keep the word or keep even the conclusions drafted by the European Council. And this is why we think we should work together on all of this. This government has been extremely pro-European, sacrificing a lot in order to enhance the accession towards the European Union. We have achieved with the accession in NATO last year. And these are really great achievements for a country for a very short period of time, just for 3-4 years, which also shows that you can do a lot if you're focused, but you can also do a lot if you are motivated and if you have an open process, you can even do more. This is why, in order to convince citizens that Europe matters, that European Union matters at all, we need to speed up, because it gets to a point where no one can explain and no one can foresee what is next.
Absolutely. I will now pose you another question that has been raised in writing by Vanya Ivanova, she is asking, how do you involve in the process the people who left North Macedonia and live since many years in the EU?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, I think she's talking about diaspora and how are the people who are living outside the EU involved in the integration process or in North Macedonia's effort of joining the EU?
Well, this is why I think it's important. One of the reasons why it's important to start the negotiations. I know very good people uh, that worked in our institutions, that had a lot of experience, and day to day work across the countries of European Union or in Brussels. Many of them in Brussels in different institutions, law firms, etc. And I think that we need to do everything we can to bring some of those people back, at least temporary, to help the process. To that end, when I was in my previous life, when I worked as a chief negotiator of the technical preparations for the negotiations, the government made a public call to motivate all the people, all the citizens of North Macedonia that live abroad and that are in the country, that work in the private sector or work in some civil society organizations or in successful companies across Europe, to sign up for specific chapters and to declare how can they help. And we have a list of 300 or more than 300 people that have declared their preparation to help the country. Once we open the negotiations, I can guarantee that I myself in my portfolio for sure, but I hope that also others will do the same, will involve the good experts coming from North Macedonia that are already very successful across Europe to give their contribution to the country, because many of them would actually come back and help, not for, I don't know, remuneration or for anything else, but just of course that is important, that it's not to be neglected, but the primary goal is to help the country to transform. And I'm sure that many of them would today, if we didn't have this impasse of 15 years, that many of them today would work in our public sector or would represent North Macedonia in Brussels.
And because you said when we open negotiations, I have a question from Melanie Scarlett, who is asking, what do you think will be North Macedonia's top 3 challenges once accession talks are open, and how much do these resonate with the population?
My opinion, and now I will speak as someone with experience in the area of European integration, and not as a Minister of Justice. But I think that we will certainly need to do a lot in the area of economy and common market, because I don't think that our economy is fully compatible or fully aware of how it should work once we open the negotiations, or once we get uh, to become members of the European Union. We also need a lot of transformation in the agriculture. This is my opinion. Although we're doing much, yeah, we also have a lot to do in the environment, although we have done something there. But I think that these 3 common market, environment and agriculture, will be, speaking about policies, will be areas in which we will need to give an extra effort. Of course, everything from the fundamentals will be a challenge all the time, but this is why, as I said previously, we need to keep the focus on it, and that is a precondition for anything else to function well. So after singling out fundamentals, then these three areas.
Yes, and because earlier you spoke about the new methodology, I wanted to ask you, how does the new methodology impact more concretely the work that you have to do, including in the area of rule of law? And on also, of course, the new methodology on the back now of the COVID-19 crisis.
Well, the new methodology is a good device to refresh the process of integration. And in my opinion, it is welcome if it gives better dynamics. But in order to know that, we should try it. And I know I have heard the Commissioner Várhelyi saying that he will now propose new methodology for Serbia and Montenegro. But I also hope that the best way to test the new methodology is to start it with North Macedonia and Albania. I think that we should, it has good intentions and it is well organized. But in order to work in practice, it should have a specific timeline. So once we have the starting point of the negotiations, we should have a specific dynamics that will motivate us to work more, to work better, and to have evaluation in the meantime. Speaking about COVID crisis, you know, in the first phase, before the vaccines, I think it helped the coordination of the regional cooperation in the Western Balkan countries and the European Union worked quite well, particularly regarding the green lanes and the cooperation for food supply and medical supply of medicaments across the Western Balkans. Unfortunately, this didn't work so well with the vaccination, with the immunization, and we hope that I know that yesterday the Commissioner Várhelyi had a meeting with all the national IPA coordinators from the Western Balkans, and then in the next couple of weeks we should get at least part of what we need in terms of vaccines, which will increase the trust, the mutual trust, and that the European Union takes care about Western Balkans after.
I will pose you the final two questions. One comes from Theodora, who has raised her hand. Theodora, would you like to intervene now, please?
Hello, and thank you very much, Minister, for your very insightful comments and for your dialogue today with EPC. Thank you, Corina. You mentioned the North Macedonia and Greece conflict that was resolved. So I would like to pose a question on a matter of conflict resolution mechanism and dialogue support when it comes to those matters being a stumbling block for countries that want to access the EU in the future. So I would like to ask, drawing from this experience of the long-standing conflict being resolved, if you think that other similar conflicts in the area, is it better to be resolved within an EU facilitated dialogue and an EU framework, or on a bilateral level, on the national level of those countries? For example, you could give an example for Belgrade and Pristina potentially. Thank you.
Thank you, Theodora. We then have a question again from Francois Lafont, who is asking about the census, the national census, which is in preparation under your ministerial responsibility. I'm cutting a little bit short into his question. What this important census will bring to your specific portfolio, he's asking, and your forthcoming policies. And to that, I may add, to what extent is the census risky for inter-ethnic relations in view of some of the recent news?
Okay, very important question for a few minutes, but I'll try to make the key points. Speaking about the dispute resolution and our experience with Greece, I had the chance and the privilege to be part of our team that worked on the PRESPA agreement. I think there, I don't know if there is a rule for whether it's better with EU mediation or bilaterally, because it depends on the parties, on the who are we talking about. I have to tell you that in case between Greece and North Macedonia, there was a mediator by the United Nations who was actually committed to this dispute for a couple of decades. And he was tasked by the United Nations Security Council to do this job. So there was a mediation, but the most of the part and most of the agreement was done in a bilateral discussion. And I think this is important. However, what is necessary is to have a basic principles on which you make an agreement. And that is certainly taking care of the integrity of each of the sides and taking care of the balance in the compromise. Also, the sustainability of the solution. So these solutions of these bilateral disputes at many levels, of course, always need to be courageous, but they also need to be sustainable, which means that you need to push it through your domestic institutions, national institutions, but also it should be promoted and accepted by promoted to the citizens and accepted by the citizens. Maybe not immediately, but on a long run. So I think it's also always and also a matter of perception when the two sides make compromise that they have that both of the sides have given up something and both of the sides have got something in return. This is why when I say it's very important to take care of, and if the both sides take care of this, there is no need for ostensible or for big mediation. But if there is no, let's say, sense of this, then certainly mediation is welcome. Of course, in the case of Serbia, Kosovo, I wouldn't comment because there is already an open mediation by the European Union, and I think it's necessary at some point. But for this is why us, for example, we signed this agreement with Bulgaria in order to have a framework for resolving the differences without mediation. So I don't think there is a unique answer to each of the cases. Basically, it depends how rational and how serious are the two sides. And of course, one of the main preconditions is that both sides want a solution, of course, and need a solution. Speaking about the census, I think this census is, as I mentioned, coming after 20 years. The last census we had back in 2002 was actually a census right after an interethnic conflict. So after we had an interethnic conflict in 2000, back in 2001, in 2002 there was a census of the population. That census was extremely important because after the ethnic conflict, we have amended the constitution, and practically the rights of the ethnic communities are related to the percentage of their numbers in the population. So beside the ethnic Macedonian majority of the population, all the other communities have a specific rights based on the numbers. So all the communities which are over 20%, which in our case is the Albanian community, they have set of rights which are reserved for them, and the rest, the smaller communities, then who are less than 20%, they have other set of rights. And this is why the census is important from the point of view from the point of view of interethnic relations. However, our government and most of the political parties were very clear that none of the rights of any community would be interfered, regardless of the numbers, even though we don't expect any great fluctuation in the numbers of the citizens. This is why I think that problematizing the census is only making a political or nationalistic mobilization for political purposes. It has nothing to do with what we actually need. And I think we are a unique case of a country after 20 years that is conducting those census after 20 years. And why we need it? Because many people moved out from the country. We don't know the exact population size of the country. We don't know the population size of the particular cities, towns, and municipalities. And that is absolutely necessary for building up a good educational policy, good organization of the courts, if we speak about my portfolio, good organization of the prosecutors' offices, good organization of the free legal aid for municipalities, good organization of the healthcare policies and hospitals, etc., etc. This is why I think it's necessary to have this sooner better than later, because it's the only way to cut the spell, to break the spell after 20 years without census.
Thank you so much, Minister. Thank you very much indeed for your openness and for your briefing and also for making time when you are in Brussels to stop by the EPC and inform our audience about developments, but also allow for this kind of dialogue to take place. We very much appreciate that. And I really hope that next time around I'll be able to welcome you in person at the EPC. Until then, I hope you stay safe, and I wish you good luck in the work that you're carrying out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Corina. It was my pleasure.
And thank you also to our participants. Until next time, a wonderful afternoon to everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.